Welcome to Two Bees in a Podcast, brought to you by the Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory at the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. It is our goal to advance the understanding of honeybees and beekeeping, grow the beekeeping community, and improve the health of honeybees everywhere. In this podcast, you'll hear research updates, beekeeping management practices discussed, and advice on beekeeping from our resident experts, beekeepers, scientists, and other program guests. Join us for today's program, and thank you for listening to Two Bees in a Podcast. Welcome to another episode of Two Bees in a Podcast. Today we will be joined by Michael Young, all the way from Northern Ireland. He is a member of the Institute of Northern Ireland Beekeepers, and he is a world expert on honey judge programs. Then we will be joined by Dr. Bill Kerns from the University of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. He will be finishing his series on pests of the apiary by discussing miscellaneous pests. I just want to spend a moment talking to you about the situation that Amy and I find ourselves in. The next few podcasts that we will be releasing will be released while Amy and I are working from our respective homes because of the COVID-19 outbreak. So as a result, I wanted to tell you, our listeners, that the sound quality may be iffy in some places. We wanted to make sure the show continued, but Amy and I had to search in our respective homes for the best place to record, and believe it or not, those places were our respective closets. So Amy's in her closet recording various aspects of podcasts moving forward, and I am as well. So I wanted to apologize about the quality of some of the sound, but I wanted to make sure that you know that we are committed to bringing you up-to-date, cutting-edge information on honeybees and beekeeping. And we're doing that by making sure that we're able to record and offer podcasts while we were at our home during this time of global pandemic. Welcome to Two Bees in a Podcast. I'm host Jamie Ellis, accompanied by Amy Vu. What's up, Amy?
Oh, hey. Hi, everyone.
That's the best you can do?
That's the best I can do.
I said, what's up, Amy Vu? And you said, oh, hey, hi, everyone.
What's up?
Okay, well,
better.
I'll take what I can get. Okay. All right. Amy, we've got a real treat for our listeners today. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. You know, well, I'm just going to say royalty.
Royalty.
Yeah.
I think that is a fair way to describe our next guest. So who is our next guest? Our next guest is none other than Mr. Michael Young. Michael is a retired executive chef from Northern Ireland. He was in the kitchen for 53 years. I wonder where he is now. I guess in the rest of the house. Not only is he a retired executive chef, but he also taught chefs. He lives in Hillsborough, Northern Ireland. He's the past chairman and founder of the Institute of Northern Ireland Beekeepers. He has 4 daughters, 9 grandkids, is the owner of a Harley Fat Boy motorcycle.
Fancy.
He's a senior Welsh judge, a British Welsh honey judge, Scottish Welsh honey judge, that's Welsh, Irish honey judge, Georgian honey judge, Floridian honey judge. This guy is Mr. Honey Judge. Michael, welcome to Two Bees in a Podcast.
You know what else he likes?
Well, that was a great start, Jamie.
Thanks, Michael.
My face is blushing here, and it's great to be with you. I mean, it really is. And hello from Ireland.
Yeah,
on a soft day.
I was going to say that Michael loves to follow us on Facebook, and he loves to share and comment and voice his opinions on it. So he's a great person to have on the podcast.
Well, shoot, Michael, thanks for being such an avid follower.
Chocolates are on the way, Amy.
Oh. One of the things I didn't mention, and I'm going to try not to chase this rabbit too much, but Michael, I consider you a personal friend. I've known you for a long time, been at your house many times and vice versa, but I'll try not to chase that rabbit because we really want to spend some time talking to you about honey judge programs, if that's okay.
That is excellent. Thank you for that. But I'll just say one thing. Mm-hmm. I first met you in 1999 when you were dancing with Amanda.
I think you're mistaken, Michael, because I'm Southern Baptist, and Southern Baptists are not allowed to dance.
I have the photographs.
Oh, well, maybe I was being Methodist for just a moment.
We'll share it to the additional resources on the website.
All right, fantastic. So Michael, first of all, we're happy to have you here. You know, you're obviously sought after speaker, not only in our program here in Florida, but around the world. So I want to talk to you about honey judging. You know, we've mentioned you're a Welsh honey judge, a British honey judge, Scottish honey judge, and so on. What are honey judges? What are honey judges, and what do they do?
Well, Jamie, honey judges are very eccentric people, for a start. Okay, they're a wee bit different than the average guy, but they come in all shapes and sizes, fit, fat, thin, big, grey, everything. That is what a honey judge is about. But a honey judge, Jamie, is really a person who values their bee produce and makes it so clean, tidy, and fit for sale. They don't just put it in the jar. They make sure everything is clinical, and just like washing a car, that's what they do with it. They're proud to be a beekeeper, but they want to be proud to be a honey judge so they can basically wash the car, make them look really smart. And that's basically what a honey judge is in my case.
I love the fact that I asked you what is a honey judge and that you said it's not just honey, right? It's hive products. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's almost like a hive product judge. Mm-hmm. Honey's one part, but the idea is that you're taking, the products of the bees, refining them and readying them and showing them for really the beautiful things that the bees actually, intended them to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Michael, can you tell us how you got into honey judging and maybe a little bit of history about honey judging?
My wife came home one day and said, in the early 90s, my hairdresser's brother is selling a box of bees. I knew nothing about bees, so I purchased it. So she really started me off. But I get so addicted with honey, and I'm a chef, right? Chefs like to present food like a masterpiece, like Rembrandt. They do a painting. Chefs create. They have an artistic license that they can create a beautiful piece of food on a plate. And that goes with me on the honey and candles and mead and whatever. I love to take the basic products and turn it into something special. And that's what honey judges do. Okay?
Okay.
Well, how long has this been a thing? I'm sorry to ask that question in such a weird way. I became aware of it really kind of when I started as an undergrad at University of Georgia, but that presumably before that, people have been judging hive products for a while, right? There's an art, there's a science to this. So how long, what is the history of all of that?
Well, the history really starts back in Britain, of course. I think the Welsh were pretty good at that in those days. And they're looking at about 1829, 1830s was when they had their first. The British were absolutely nuts. They're nuts at showing anything, whether it's a carrot. There's a competition in Yorkshire for the biggest leek.
Of course there is.
A leek.
Of course, Michael.
And there's competitions for everything. And that's one good thing. When you have competition, it raises the standards of the product. And that's what it really does. Now, the first really big honey show was in 1885, which was a monster of a show. And it was called the Indian and Colonial Honey Show. So what the British beekeepers did, they bought lots of honey so let me get this right. I'm getting confused here. They invited all the Commonwealth countries to participate in a honey show in London. And that first one actually was 1885. So the honey judges have been going since 1885 and way before that. And we're still getting better. And, that's the way it is. Something starts off with an idea, and of course, then it blossoms into a big flower. It's beautiful. When you go and see some of the honeys, take Virginia Webb. You know Virginia, don't you?
Yeah, Virginia's a beekeeper in Georgia who just understands making hive products right. Yep, she's really great at this.
She is the perfect example. Virginia is one of the best honey judges in the world.
Absolutely.
And her products are superb.
Indeed.
And if you remember, when I first went to Georgia, there were no honey shows as such being professionally judged. So you need, if you're Jamie, if you are, or Amy, if you're making a candle and you put it in a show, you want a professional person to judge that. Mm-hmm. Because you have took hours and hours and hours. You don't want the milkman coming in and saying, judge that. You know,
they can judge milk.
Nothing against milkmen, of course, but
no, or the coalman. Do you have milkmen? Do you have coalmen?
We used to. I think the listeners are still trying to figure out what's a leak.
They're wondering, yeah.
All right, okay.
No, it's okay. I love this. But one of the things that you said that is so true, right? You know, I've been to the UK many times, and it just seems like the British really, they do show everything, just what you mentioned, and they take a lot of pride in their product. Your quote here is perfect. When you have a competition, it raises the quality of a product. So honey shows have done that. So they have taught beekeepers how to invest in the value of their product, how to show their product the best way it can be shown, how to present it to the public the best way it can be presented. And I think we have honey judge programs and honey judges like yourself to thank for that. What do you say about that?
You're 100%. In fact, you're never not 100%. Never mind just now. You're always 100%, Jamie.
Thanks, Michael.
But you're absolutely right. And I must thank you, actually, and Georgia and the rest of the American beekeepers, because you have started a training program in Florida, and so is Georgia, and it's moving on now. That is awesome, because that shows people, to actually take their product to a standard, train honey judges, train them how to do the thing right. And again, I'm going back to Virginia here. This is Virginia's jar of honey. She left me with her first Happy and Mondial win in 2005. Now, when you can take an ordinary beekeeper who knows nothing about putting honey in a jar, nothing at all, and ends up one of the best exhibitors in the world, you know, that is fantastic. And Jamie, you do a fantastic training program, as is Georgia on the Bruts. But you do a brilliant program, and I'm not patronizing you here. Your programs are nothing compared to what the British have.
Sure.
Your programs, your training programs, actually have got over 100 judges.
Wow.
The British beekeepers have only 20. Now, why is that? They've been over 100 years in the business because they don't do training programs like you.
Thanks. Well, let me ask you, Michael. So as an interested beekeeper, you know, I can put honey into a honey show, but what else can I put into a honey show?
Well, I'll give you an idea. We have 52 classes in our honey show.
Wow.
That's a lot.
52 classes. Now, you have anything with a bee on it. You can make some, you know, you can make a class for that particular thing. If you're going to make, say, pottery, you could have a class on honey pots, which is the best honey pot.
Sure.
You know, that's a good idea. I never thought of that, actually. But anyway.
We'll add it.
So you have candles, you have embroidery, you have photography, you have models, beeswax models. You have honey, of course, chunk honey, cut comb, bass honey, frames for displaying. You have, and you know, it's endless. Bread, honey cakes, sweets. You call them candy, don't you? We call them sweets. You always change names over there.
That's what the Americans do best. We take something nice and just kind of turn it around a little bit.
So yeah, it's endless. It's absolutely endless what you can do in a honey show.
Yeah, and I know, Michael, we have honey shows, you know, throughout the state. We have one at Bee College. We have one during our Bee College. We do the honey judge training during that time. And, you know, besides the shows, looking at it from a long-term impact perspective, you know, what else are people doing? You know, after they go, they submit their jars of honey or their candles or their artwork. And then what happens then? It doesn't just stop there, does it?
No. You prepare for the next show. No, but really.
There's always the next show.
Okay. But to be honest with you, Amy, you know, when you look at what you've just said there, not everybody likes honey shows. Not everybody. You know, maybe not their cup of tea, basically. And when you do get someone who's interested, it's really so contagious. it rubs off you, and you want to be a honey judge, and you want to do this, and you want to improve your standard. Now, if you, Amy, put in a candle, or say you're producing honey and you got a first prize, do you realize that if you're selling it, do you realize the market you could attract if you got a first prize in the big honey show?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Incredible. It is incredible. I think that's one plus side, money value sides on honey showing. But I don't do it for that. I do it because I love to raise the standards and raise the bar for all beekeepers.
Mm-hmm. But there's potential for the economic value.
I think you're right, Michael. You said that, not all beekeepers are necessarily interested in shows, but I do feel that all beekeepers can benefit both from Welch honey judges, because to me, to become a honey judge means that you have risen to a level that you understand what's necessary to produce a premium product. But likewise, I feel it's a good idea for individuals to enter their hive products in honey shows, because they will receive feedback from trained judges, and that feedback can help them develop better products and command a higher profit when they sell these products. So what do you say as a judge when you are trying to convince people that it's valuable to them to put their hive products in honey shows? How are you going to sell me on entering my honey or wax or et cetera into a honey show?
That sometimes depends on the individual, because there are a lot of individuals who don't want to go near a honey show. But I would say to these, listen, it's not just about winning in a sense, because you are going to learn how to prepare your product the best it can be.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. I had a friend, Billy Beatty, nice old guy, he's dead now. He used to bury his money under tractors. He hated the taxman. And every time I went through in his apiary, he'll say, there's money under that tractor wheel. Honestly, God,
when he passed, did you get your shovel? I mean, Michael?
No, and every time we walked past a hive, he said, there's money under that hive. And I said, Billy, don't tell me. I do not want to know. Honestly, goodness, I do not want to know. And all he was doing was telling me where his money is, because he trusted me. But anyway.
And you just told everybody through our podcast.
Where does he live? Where did he live?
What was his address? GPS coordinates, please, Michael.
Billy Beatty actually was an old guy. And I said, Billy, you must show some honey. So he eventually did. Now, I was judging at a show, and I found a spider in the bottom of the jar. Spider, right?
Sure.
So I know what happened here, because the guy who did it obviously didn't clean his jars. He just chucked the jar out the box and filled it up. Now, a spider fell in there, but couldn't get out. But the one thing about a spider falling in a jar of honey, it sort of webs itself to the container. It sticks itself down so it doesn't move. So this spider actually was in the back. And I said, after I disqualified it, I said to Gail, the honey show manager, I said, I need to speak to this guy. I need to speak to him. And who is it? Oh, it's Billy Beatty. Oh my God. I said, I asked him to put us on the show. And anyway, I called him over after the show was up. I said, Billy, I know what you've done with that jar. I said, you put that in your shed and you haven't cleaned it. And also, can I just say something? I smelled creosote in the rubber when I turned the lid over. And there's a lot of beekeepers store their jars and lids in the shed. And that wee rubber pulls in any bad aroma and stays in there. And he said, boy, what's wrong, Mike? I said, listen, there's a spider in there, for goodness sake. He said, no. He says, no. He said, oh, yeah. So I showed him that. I said, I'm sorry, Mike. I said, that's okay. But now you know to next time you don't do what you've done. You clean the jars so you improve your standards.
Sure. I think that's probably the best story ever to tell people that entering honey shows is a way to improve your standards and get feedback.
To not have spiders in the bottom of your jar.
So one of the things I think that's important maybe that we glossed over with what you just said is you said you had to speak to the show secretary to find out who the person was. A well-done honey show, the entries are anonymous. The judges don't know who the entries, who submit each entry, right? Isn't that true?
That's absolutely right. And in the old days when they each entry, if you enter 6 entries, right, they will all have a different number.
Mm-hmm.
So, Amy, if you entered 6 different classes and you had the same number, and I knew you as a judge,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw you putting one jar in, I could get your number. So your numbers are all over the place. So if I was a corrupt judge or a bad judge, not that I'm saying this, they are out there, but they are, I could go around and pick all yours as first prizes. So the most important thing about that is the honey show secretary is so valuable and so important that she knows what to do. We don't go near the honey show secretary while she's doing all the paperwork, because we don't want to have that risk of, I wouldn't say cheating, but causing problems.
Sure.
And a honey show secretary, and I know Glinda that's with you, she's awesome. But they're worth their weight in gold.
Mm-hmm.
The work they do is incredible. It's more than the judge. He just comes and goes.
So,
Did I sideline there?
Yeah. So, we're talking about the honey show, and we can circle back around to, the actual honey judging and honey judge training. What does it take to be a honey judge? What requirements does it take for someone to become a honey judge? Are there different levels, or what does that look like?
Yeah, there's different levels. There's 3 levels. First, you need to start going for the introduction training class, how to become a honey judge. That's your first one. You can't go to a show and say, how do I become a honey judge? You have to go to the first training class, which is the introduction of how to become a honey judge. That sets out your path. And then you go away. You've been told to go away, and you exhibit as many products you want, but you must have 75 points. Now, a first prize is 6 points, a second prize is 5, and so forth. Third is 4. You collect 75 points, and that will take you up to the next level until you get the 7. So what I'm saying here, and it's across the show bench, it's just not honey. You've got to be good at candles. You've got to be good at honey cakes. You've got to be good at honey. So it's not just you've got to be good at honey. You have to know your salt right across the show bench. Mm-hmm. And that's important as well. But so you go out there, and also you steward under as many honey judges as you can, professional honey judges. You don't want somebody, the milkman, who has never shown or judged anything. There's that
milkman again.
Yeah, the milkman. We have a great milkman. Trevor's been with us.
It's too late, Michael. I think you've already burned that bridge, buddy. Anyway.
But that's how you do it. You have to get the points, and then you have to train steward under at least 3 honey judges, professional honey judges. Then you come back to the second level. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the second level is an advanced training.
It's an advanced training. You come to the class, the training, you are shown how to produce things, prepare, and show, how to show, which is a fantastic class. And really, if you want to be a honey judge, there is no way in this world you're going to be a good honey judge unless you go to those training classes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. Not only do you have to go to training, but you have to compete and win in a honey show so that you know what it's like to prepare the entries, which will make you a better judge of the entries. I think that's really neat that you guys have set up your program that way. That's really neat. So you still enjoy it after all these years? You still enjoy going to a show and picking up that jar of honey and helping the individual who put that there, know what they did and didn't do well?
Yeah, I do, Jamie. And, there are different types of exhibitors out there and different types of people. And they're not all the same. So you have to treat them differently. Now, I'm in Washington, D.C. with Jennifer and Kaya next month. And they're doing a training program, which is Carl and George, which is brilliant. So what you've started now, someone else has started.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Which is fantastic. Then we go into Knoxville, and they're doing a training program there as well. So it is contagious, but the right people will then develop from your training and further on. And it's great. I'm so pleased about it.
So, Michael, I've really enjoyed this interview. I appreciate you joining us today to talk about honey judge programs, as well as entering honey judges and entering honey judge programs, as well as becoming a honey judge. You know, my favorite quote that you said, I've already stated it, but this idea when you have a competition, it raises the quality of a product. I really think that is the value of honey shows. It helps all of us make our hive products better. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed seeing you two.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, listeners, that was Michael Young, who's been an executive chef, 53 years in the kitchen. He's now retired and hanging out in Hillsborough, Northern Ireland with his wife.
He's rolling his eyes at you.
His daughters, his grandkids. He's riding his Harley Davidson Fat Boy. And when he's not doing those things, he is traveling the world, judging honey shows, as well as teaching future honey judges. Michael, thank you.
Wassail. That's my meat.
Thanks for listening to Two Bees and a Podcast.
You take care. Bye.
Bye now.
For more information about this podcast, check out our website at ufhoneybee.com.
Beekeepers, there are lots of different things that love to attack bee hives, right? The bees inside can be a food resource for them. The honey can be a food resource. The physical nest structure might be a place that these things want to live. And there's another, category of organisms. I call this kind of the miscellaneous category of organisms that can be apiary pests. Here to talk with us today about the threat that birds, small mammals, and amphibians and reptiles pose to honeybee colonies is Dr. Bill Kerns. Dr. Kerns is an associate professor in entomology in the Entomology and Nematology Department at the University of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining us again for what is another segment in this series of segments on apiary pests.
Glad to be here.
Amy, did you know that birds can be a problem for bees?
I did not, actually.
Have you ever heard of the birds and the bees? This is not what we're talking about right now. We're talking literally about birds. All right?
Tell me about birds.
And one of the things that you have to be aware of is when you have a bee colony,
Yep.
you have lots of bees flying around.
That's right.
And
Do you?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, yes.
Some beekeepers don't, and we get complaints from them usually. But
So there are lots of birds that are primarily insect eaters.
that's right.
Matter of fact, there's a whole group called the flycatchers that specialize on catching insects on the wing. And they will feed on honeybees. They will grab honeybees out of the air. Now,
They'd be bee catchers, though.
well, no, bee catchers are in Africa.
I'm being facetious, Bill. You call them flycatchers, and surely the bird must have gotten confused and caught a bee by accident.
Yeah, well, anything that's flying.
I got you.
Maybe it should be flying insect catcher.
I agree. That seems like a better common name.
And so they're eating bees, but they're not really hurting the colony.
It's funny, Bill. I had an email some years ago from a beekeeper in the Middle East. I forget which country he was in, but he said that the bird problems there were so significant that they were losing huge populations of their field force. And so they were asking me for ideas. And of course, we don't really have major bird problems here in North America. There are some. We'll talk about that. But I had looked up for him and found that a lot of people in these areas where birds are a significant problem will actually put bird nets over their apiaries, which are basically like fish nets, right? That they would suspend in the air. So the bees have no real big problem getting through the nets to go out and forage, but birds have a problem, hunkering down close to those hives. You think those are effective at all? Limiting bird problems?
I don't usually see bird problems in North America. Now in Africa, you could very well, especially if you got, what's that little bird, the little quella?
Sure.
That forms these huge flocks.
Yeah.
And they're sparrows, so they eat insects.
Yeah.
And I could see them going through and just decimating the bee populations, the field force.
Yeah.
I don't see them going after the colony, but they will eat the bees that are out foraging. The one problem that you may occasionally encounter is woodpeckers.
Okay.
But I usually see woodpecker damage associated with carpenter bees. They're opening up the wood to get to the carpenter bees, the larvae and the pupae inside the wood. So, but for honeybees, I haven't seen very much sign of of bird damage.
Yeah. And so I agree with that. I would say around the world, birds probably pose a fairly minimal risk to bees, but there are some places that they're a big risk. And I think in those cases, using bird nets might be a good way to strategize against them.
Yeah. So, okay, let's move away from birds and talk about other miscellaneous pests that are in the apiary. What about amphibians and reptiles? Do they pose a problem to honeybees at all?
Again, usually they're going to be associated with a reduction in either the guard bees at the entrance to the hive or the foraging bees. And in some cases, toads are notorious, especially in South Florida and Central America, the Caribbean,
Australia.
Yeah. The giant toad, they will just come out and they'll sit at the entrance and just snap up the bees that are coming to the entrance of the hive. And eventually they could do some significant damage.
Yeah, and a lot of these things, especially like cane toads, which are the toad everyone's heard of, right? This toad that was brought in to deal with pests around, cane population, cane plantations, et cetera. These toads have gotten out. And I remember when I was in Australia, there's such a big pest. They come in at nighttime. They do a little bit of scratching at the colony entrance. These bees will come out and the toads will just sit there and pick them off. So a lot of Australian beekeepers, it'll be a little graphic, but it's still an interesting way to deal with it. What they did is they would put down sheets of plywood in the apiary because during the day, the cane toads would go hide up under those. And when they would go work their bees, they would pull up that plywood and stomp on all the cane toads. Now remember, for those of you who are panicking here, these cane toads were an invasive species there and causing significant damage. And so that was their way of kind of dealing with cane toads in the apiary. They'd provide a place for them to hide. When they go work the bees during daylight hours, they'd pull up that piece of plywood and stomp them. So, I've seen a lot of different things with regard to cane toads and addressing toad problems in the apiary.
And the Australians have actually developed a whole series of cane toad traps.
Yep.
Remember, that's the same, we're talking about the same animal. The cane toad, the giant toad, the marine toad.
Sure.
It's all the same thing. It's originally a tropical American toad that was moved around the world by people to cause all kind of problems for people.
Sure.
But they thought they were doing good. They were trying to control sugarcane pests.
There you go.
Are honeybees able to defend themselves from all these like birds and amphibians and reptiles? Like why are honeybees not defending themselves or able to sting these animals to death?
Oh, they probably could.
That's the weird thing. They do, right?
They do. Okay.
Yeah.
They'll dissect these toads and they'll have stingers down their throat. So these bees are stinging on the way down. It's crazy. So
they may be somewhat resistant to the venom.
Sure.
But it's surprising. I mean, if you think about what toads eat, they eat some tough stuff.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Beetles and stinging ants. So bees probably aren't that much worse than anything else.
So let's stay in the amphibian and reptile category. In my own colonies, I have occasionally seen lizards be consumers of my bees, especially like the green anoles that we have here. And there'd be lizards around the world that would do similar things elsewhere. But they would sit on kind of the outer edges of the hive and they'd wait till a bee gets by and they'll grab that honeybee and eat it as well. But even still, kind of in this miscellaneous category, if we think about birds, we think about toads, we think about lizards and some other things. These are usually minor pests. I know cane toads have been big pests and problems for bee colonies in the past, but usually more minor pests, wouldn't you say?
For most of our like tree frogs and lizards generally are just going to eat, 3 or 4 bees and then they'll be full.
Exactly.
So they're not going to be major consumers. Something like a big cane toad, it will eat a handful of bees at a time.
Yep.
And then I don't know about up here, but in South Florida and throughout the Caribbean, very often we find geckos underneath our covers. And I've never been overly concerned about it.
That's often the way I feel. I kind of take the nature approach with that. A gecko's got to eat too, right? Yep. So usually if it's just a few bees here and there, I'm not freaking out. But I know that in some instances, cane toads, maybe in some other amphibians or reptile could be a big issue. Let's segue now to another category that I think maybe is a little bit more significant than the former two we've mentioned. And this is the category that I loosely call the small mammals. And so for us, That can include skunks or possums or raccoons. It can be mice. For other people around the world, for example, when I did my PhD in South Africa, they really worried about honey badgers, which by some definition
Honey
is not
badgers
really
don't
a small.
care.
It's not a small mammal.
Yeah.
So let's
Jamie didn't get that one.
I'll pretend it was a good joke and keep. So let's talk about within the small mammals, Bill. There's kind of three categories. I'm going to say these are the categories where they attack colonies at nighttime. We'll talk about those, and then outright attack colonies like the honey badger that handles it much like a bear would. And then the third category where small mammals are maybe using the honeybee colony as a nest itself. So let's talk about that first group, the group that maybe comes in the evening and eats bees. Can you give us examples of these?
All right. Probably for those of us in North America, the most common examples are going to be the skunks.
Sure.
And in North America, we have the striped skunk, the spotted skunk, the hooded skunk, and they occur throughout most of North America. And then you'll find similar types of organisms in other parts of the world.
Sure.
And basically what they do is, striped skunks are notorious for going up to the entrance. They'll lay down in front of the hive and they will scratch at the front of the hive, causing a few guard bees to come to the outside.
Sure.
Where they get gobbled up.
That's right.
And they keep doing that, and they might eat a handful of bees in a night. Mm-hmm. But the problem is they come back night after night.
Yep.
And this constant irritation to the colony tends to make the colony a little more defensive. And they're losing their guard bees.
Sure.
So it can be a problem. One of the tricks is to use what's called a skunk board.
Sure.
Which is basically just a piece of plywood or lumber that you drive nails through it and you put it in front of the entrance to the hive.
Pointy side up. Yep.
Pointy
it's
side
a
up.
little strip of wood with nails pointing up through that piece of wood right at the entrance.
So when they're trying to get there, they
exactly
step
right.
on the
Well, as
nails.
they kind of scratch that entrance, they're getting their paws poked.
Well,
right.
the other important thing is that, yes, they can reach over that and they can scratch at the entrance, but the reason that skunks lay down is because their belly is pretty bare. Mm-hmm. And that's where the bees can get them.
Huh.
So if they can't lay their belly down on the ground because that spiky board is there, well, now the bees can defend the colony and drive them away.
I hope all the honeybees out there are listening to this podcast.
It'd be helpful if they were. So another thing that they can do, sometimes I wonder if I should comment or not. So another thing that people do to kind of address that kind of category of small mammals, they'll just put their colonies up higher off the ground, just slightly higher so that these things can't deal with it. So I'm going to take the second category of mammal, and that's kind of the bigger mammals that will do some damage to bee colonies or beehives. Now, we talked about bears in another episode, but I want to specifically mention honey badgers here. I lived in South Africa. Honey badgers are a problem. They kind of handle colonies a lot like bears do. They can paw through the wood. They can break the wood. They can push over these hives, and they go in and do what bears do. They eat the brood, they eat the honey, and they eat the bees. And South African beekeepers in Africa in general might put fences around their hives to stop that, or they'll try to trap these honey badgers and move them elsewhere. But these particular mammals can be a big issue from them. And now let's kind of segue into that third category. These are the smallest of the small mammals that might be using honeybee hives as a nest site. Now I'm talking about things like mice, right? So talk a little bit about that, Bill.
So usually in temperate regions,
sure,
you'll have your native mice, and it can be anything. It could be like dormice in Europe,
sure,
or it could be deer mice or white-footed mice or cotton mice here in North America. And what happens is in the wintertime, the bees ball up, and so they're generating heat. They keep the inside of the hive at a reasonably comfortable temperature. And so these mice are going in, building their nest in the corner.
Yep.
It's almost like moving into a heated house.
Yeah.
And we see the same thing with our houses. The mice come in the fall to get away from the cold.
Bill, you've got mice in your houses?
Gross.
Oh, man, come on.
Not right now.
Aren't you an urban entomologist?
Yeah, right now I'm dealing with rats.
Okay,
so.
well, just air your laundry there, Bill. Just air your laundry.
We all have to do it here in Florida.
So I have seen mice in lots of colonies, and they do just what you say. They go to kind of a corner of a few frames, excavate out a little cavity, and build their nest. When I was in South Africa back in 2013, I saw some sort of small rodent. I don't know what it was. It was mouse-like, but not quite a mice. And I think I remember the name, but I'm scared to say it. Be wrong.
Not quite a mice.
Not quite a mouse. Not quite a mice. Not quite mice, or not quite a mouse. But I don't remember with certainty, so I won't even say the name. But it did essentially what our mice do. How do you keep those things out?
The simplest way is to use a entrance excluder.
Or mouse guard.
Or a mouse guard.
Yeah.
And it can be just a piece of sheet metal with holes that are just the right size for the bees to come and go.
Yep.
But the mice can't get in.
That's
the simplest way.
And we tend to only have to do that more in the more temperate climates where we have genuinely cool winters that the mice would actually want to go and make a place to.
So that's what they'll do, and that's what they're going in for. They're not using any resources. They're basically...
It's the hive as a home.
Yep, got it.
Well, good. Bill, thank you so much for joining us as we talked about kind of the threat that birds and small mammals and amphibians and reptiles pose to bees. I really appreciate you joining us on Two Bees in a Podcast.
Okay, glad to be here.
Guys, you were listening to Dr. Bill Kerns. He's the Associate Professor in Entomology for the Entomology and Nematology Department at the University of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. And as always, if you want more information on these topics, you can check our show notes. Thank you for listening to this particular segment on Two Bees in a Podcast.
It's everybody's favorite game show, Stump the Chump.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It is a question and answer time of our podcast. And I just wanted to say that we have some emails that have been coming in from our audience. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to ask a question, and then we're going to go through the email that one of our listeners named Emily, has provided for us. But before we get to that, Jamie, I had a question about books and, maybe some recommendations. Can you share some basic beginner books or recommendations that you have for beginner beekeepers and what people should be looking for when they start to actually delve into the knowledge of beekeeping?
Amy, those are great questions. In fact, I get asked those questions all the time. What resources would I recommend? Obviously, one of the resources I would recommend is our own website. If you go to www.ufhoneybee.com, you can click on Beekeeper Resources and have a lot of information that we've created. But beyond that, you might guess that there are zillions of books written about bees and beekeeping. In fact,
how much is a zillion?
Yeah, it's a bunch. It's a bunch of zeros, probably a zillion zeros, I'm guessing. But if you go to any of the beekeeping equipment catalogs, if you Google beekeeping books, you're going to find a bunch. So there's a lot of them that are geared towards beginner beekeepers. One of those, for example, is Honeybees and Beekeeping: A Year in the Life of an Apiary by my colleague and mentor, Keith Delaplane at the University of Georgia. The reason I like that book is because it really starts you from I've got nothing to I need to put together this hive and put a package in it. And it follows the management of those hives throughout the first year. So how do you keep bees as a beginner throughout the first year? There's also Stories Guide to Keeping Bees by Malcolm Sanford and Richard Bonney. Malcolm is my predecessor here at the University of Florida. So he wrote one of the Stories Guide books. And if you're familiar with Stories Guide, they have Stories Guide to Raising Chickens, Stories Guide to this and that and the
cool.
other.
Okay.
So they're co-authors to the Keeping Honeybees book. There's the Beekeeper's Handbook, which is a good introductory book by Diana Samataro and Alfonso Avedabal. There's Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping by Dewey Karen. There's just a lot of very basic books like this, The Backyard Beekeeper, just things like that. I think there's even a Beekeeping for Dummies handbook. So
that's what I need.
Yeah, looking in the beekeeping catalogs and finding specifically those beginner titles, it's hard to go wrong with any of them. I also think beginner beekeepers should consider having the standard reference guides, which are the Hive and the Honeybee, which is Data Ant's book, and then ABC and XYZ of Beekeeping, which is Bee Culture's book. And both of those are really good reference manuals for beekeeping. I had those from a young, early age, and they allow me to look up beekeeping topics that were very useful to me at the time when I didn't necessarily have a mentor helping me along. So all of those books are good resources.
Awesome. Okay, so moving forward to Emily's question. So she has been a beekeeper for about 6 years now. She's in growing zone 4, so a little bit colder than where we are. She did a walkaway split last spring, I guess. And so she wanted to have 2 hives. They both overwintered, so now she has 2 hives. She really doesn't want 4 hives, and so she's kind of wondering, what she can do. And if she can take away frames from the 2 hives, can she combine them to make one walkaway split?
So there's a couple of things at play here. Number one, if you are wanting your colonies to be as strong as possible to produce honey, you can keep colonies without having to split them at all. It's okay that they are strong. That just maximizes honey production or pollination or what have you, whatever your goals are downstream. If, however, you feel like you need to remove bees, you can do splits. Now, she's using specifically the term walkaway split. I didn't even know what that term meant. I had to go look it up. But basically, for our listeners, is that, usually when we talk about splitting a hive, you are taking one hive and the colony that's in it, and you're splitting it into 2. And generally you will do that by finding the queen and keeping her in the parent hive or moving her to the split, and then purposefully putting in a queen cell or a new queen in a queen cage, or allowing that other colony to make a queen for itself. All right. A walkaway split, you're essentially doing the same thing, but you're not finding the queen. So essentially, you're going into that full-size hive, you're splitting it without looking, and you're not sure which of the 2 has the queen, the original hive or the new hive, and you find out a week later because one of those colonies is trying to make queen cells while the other's not. The benefit of that is you can just walk away without caring which one has the queen, knowing that the one that doesn't will make a queen. Now, the key to walkaway splits is you've got to make sure that both the parent hive and the new hive both have to contain frames of eggs, because
Sure.
one of them is queenless and that one has to make a queen. All right. So the question, though, that Emily asked is can you take frames from 2 hives and combine them into a split? And the
Yep.
answer to that question is yes. That is very common. Beekeepers will do that all the time. In fact, commercial beekeepers will start at the beginning of their apiaries. Let's say you've got 30 colonies, and they'll just go down those 30 making splits. And they're not necessarily trying to target a specific number of splits from a colony. They might take 3 frames to make a split from that first colony, but still have 2 extra frames from that first colony that's not quite enough to make a split, but that they combine with 1 or 2 frames from the next colony to make a split. So you can do that.
So the bees don't fight with each other?
I was about to say that very thing. A lot of people are concerned about bees fighting with one another in these scenarios. But in commercial settings, the beekeepers don't worry about that too much. If you do this work in the middle of the day, a lot of the old grumpy bees are out foraging, and those tend to be the ones that cause the problem. So if you're mixing younger bees in the middle of the day, it tends to be less of a problem. You also want to make sure that you'll have a lot of capped brood, because capped brood will emerge very quickly and you'll repopulate those splits very quickly. There is potential for a little bit of fighting, but honestly, if you combine them into the split, if you combine frames from multiple colonies into a single split, you can actually carry that split to a new apiary, and that'll minimize any of the issues. So I don't worry about the fighting so much.
Okay, and if they have eggs, I mean, would they be able to start a new queen just in a timely fashion? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's 2 questions you essentially asked, or 2 parts of that one question. Yes, they can make a new queen, but number 2, it will not be timely, right?
Yeah.
They're going to take those eggs, and as soon as the female larvae emerges from them, they're going to start trying to make queens, and that's a 2-week process post the egg hatch, right? So it's 2 weeks to the new queen. It's 2 weeks till she mates fully and starts laying her first eggs, and then it's 3 weeks until those first eggs emerge as adult worker bees. So we're talking a 6 to 7 to 8 week period before you get lots of brood being produced in that queenless, the formerly queenless split that now has a queen. So it's an okay process. It certainly works, but you just need to know that you're going to have some downtime, which is why a lot of beekeepers will purchase queen cells or mated queens in cages that they instantly put into that split so that they don't have to have all that downtime.
Got it. Now, the last question for this portion is related to that actual procedure. So if someone were to be doing that, or I guess any sort of split, is it a good idea to do it later in the day, closer to the entrance, or, is it good to do it overnight? What would reduce drift back to the original hive?
So there's a couple factors at play here. a lot of people who are making splits are just go through their apiary making splits, throw them on the back of the truck, and when they're done in that apiary, drive those splits away, multiple miles, so that the chances of drift, and drift being the term that the bees from the splits go back to their parent hives, so that the chances of drift are minimized.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, though, don't have the luxury of having multiple apiary sites, and so they really want to know how they can make splits, but leave the splits in the apiary where they are making the split. Now,
Mm-hmm.
anytime you do that, you run the risk of a lot of bees from your split drifting back to the parent
Sure.
hive. So how do you overcome that? Number one, try to make those splits in the middle of the day. Remember, it's the forager bees that are the ones that know where home is and are most likely to drift back to where that home is. So in the middle of the day, you're trying to produce a split with a disproportionate number of young bees who've never left the hive in the first place and don't know any better. The second thing I would recommend doing is putting a lot of capped brood into that split, because and it's even better if when you look at that frame of capped brood, you see bees actively emerging from it. So when you move that capped brood into that split very quickly, a lot of bees will be emerging. And so even if you do lose adult bees to drift, they're being replaced nearly instantaneously by the bees that are emerging from that comb. And number three, my third recommendation, if you're going to make a split and keep it in the apiary, is overpopulate the split. If your split, for example, is a 5-frame nuke, and you collect 5 frames to put into it, you might collect 5 frames with bees to put into it, but you might also shake 2 or 3 frames of bees into it as well. So it's 5 frames, but 7 to 8 frames worth of bees.
Yep.
Exactly. And you're accounting for and allowing that drift to happen. So those things are all beneficial. The last pointer that I would make, if you're really worried about it, is you could actually make a weaker split and move the parent colony and place the split where the parent colony was sitting. So all of that drift will be going to the split. And then you can move that parent colony elsewhere in the apiary. So it's the one losing bees to the split. But since it's a big, strong colony, it otherwise is able to lose some of its bees. So there's those 4 strategies that you can employ to maximize the chances that your split will come out strong if you want to leave it in the same apiary.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you so much, Emily, for asking the questions. Thanks, Jamie, for answering those questions.
My pleasure.
And hopefully it's not freezing up in New Hampshire, because that's actually where she is.
Yeah, and guys, keep those questions coming. We do our best to get as many of the questions as we can on air or answered via email, however we can. So thank you for listening and submitting questions to 2 Bees in a Podcast.
We'd like to give an extra special thank you to the following: to our editors, Shelby Howell and Bailey Carroll, and to our audio engineer, James Weaver. Without their hard work, 2 Bees in a Podcast would not be possible. So thank you.
For more information and additional resources for today's episode, don't forget to visit the UF-IFAS Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory's website, ufhoneybee.com. Do you have questions you want answered on air? If so, email them to honeybee@ifas.ufl.edu or message us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at UF Honeybee Lab. While there, don't forget to follow us. Thank you for listening to 2 Bees in a Podcast.